It's not a secret that the export-import process is not a simple endeavor. There's documents to be collected, e-forms to be completed, and depending on the nature of the goods, there are taxes, duties, um, government agencies that you need to file to. So it's a lot of nuances and issues that need to be kept in mind. The international trade is also governed by a whole host of regulations. So to maximize compliance, I mean, not maximize, but at least to be compliance, importers and exporters need to be familiar with all applicable laws, and they must make sure errors are minimized when filing out key paperwork, right, to ensure a seamless and effective process. So that's what we're going to cover today. Before moving on, a little bit of housekeeping. So you will receive a recording of the webinar, and at the end or during, you can send us questions throughout the Q&A panel. Now, today's speakers will be for you. My colleague, Stephen Johnson. Stephen has been actively involved with the U.S. custom brokerage industry for the past 7 years. He has a lot of experience on cloud-based ABI and also on the automated commercial environment, or ACE. One of the persons that I've seen that has most knowledge about everything related customs, which is really complex. Myself, Eduardo Bencomo, I am been with Magaya for 10 years, involved in logistics for those 10 years. And I hope we can bring you today a good and interesting webinar, right? Let's start with the state of the industry. So according to 2020 State of Logistics report that was published by the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, parcel still the fastest growing transportation mode, right? The sector is growing at 114 billion, or grew in 2019 at 114 billion, and almost a 9% increase from 2018. Of course, e-commerce is the main driver of this growth, and it's being supercharged by the COVID-19 pandemics. Everyone knows people is buying, is locked down at home, buying groceries and buying every other articles from home. So for many companies, the parcel has gone from being a niche transportation mode, before mailroom shipments, small boxes, lockers, to a critical one. So representing a portion of their annual transportation spend. The ability to manage this spend effectively in light of growing volumes and more demanding customer expectations, what will separate the leaders from the laggards moving forward. So let's look at some numbers, right? So we're looking here that the value for the U.S. customs brokerage market is estimated at $4 billion. And it's estimated to grow at a compound annual growth rate of more than 3.5 during the forecast period. That's huge, right? So there's no stopping of the influx of products into the United States, obviously. 2.7 trillion imports were processed in 2019 by the U.S. ports of entry. So that's a huge number. And even when we're not, when we had the trade war with China, that's still a very high number to consider. Next, we have $80.7 billion that were collected in duties by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. This includes $71.9 billion in duties, and the total duties collected in 2019 has increased by more than 70% when compared to 2018. That's mind-blowing. So what are we going to do? What we should do to face this influx of low-value products into the U.S. that CBP agencies enforcing a new entry type to increase visibility, border security, and safety, right? So we're going to talk about entry type 86. And for that, I want to introduce my colleague, Stephen.
Thank you, Eduardo. Yeah, when talking about the state of the industry, there's no doubt we have to bring up entry type 86. because global e-commerce, it's drastically increased the number of international shipments sent each day. When consumers and companies are buying merchandise online via an e-commerce platform like Amazon or something, it could come from anywhere in the world. And entry type 86 is a new entry type intended to help customs manage the flow of those goods, create greater visibility for the low value shipments entering the US, and at the same time, improve border protection, importer security, and safety. At the same time, Customs Entry Type 86 will improve the time-consuming import process and associated fees for importers bringing low-value products or goods into the U.S. This regulation will make customs and the border process more straightforward for the importer and shippers involved. A lot of questions that importers may be asking themselves is, is my product eligible for Type 86? And here today, we'll talk a little bit about that. But so what is Type 86? Beginning in September 2019, imports into the US with a de minimis value of $800 or less can be classified now as entry Type 86. So when imported as entry Type 86, the importers are not required to file for formal entry or pay duties or taxes. The cargo of these trade goods are considered duty-free as long as the relevant CBP form is completed. And importers can now file for entry Type 86 and complete CBP form using ACE with an ABI, with a certified ABI vendor. And the Type 86 entries, it's massive. As Eduardo was reviewing some of the numbers, the entry Type 86 has surpassed all other entry types since introduced into ACE, meaning you've got your entry 01, for consumption dutiable, 02, 03, all those combined don't equate to the amount of Type 86 entries that have now been filed through ACE since it commenced. And from here, now that we have a better look at the state of the industry, we can take a look at some of the key market trends that are happening now.
Yeah, let's look at some trends in the market. So the growth in imports driving the U.S. customs brokerage market is being influenced by the volume of imports in the United States, which increases demand for industry service regarding customs regulations for finished consumer goods and semi-finished inputs to domestic production. The growth in imports is a prime driving factor for customs brokerage market, right? So the imports of the country, as we were saying, remain steady in 2019 when compared to 2018. Well, there is a growth of more than 9% in 2018. The slowdown in 2019 can be attributed to the U.S.-China trade war that we mentioned before. But I don't think there's nothing to stop that influx. The manufacturing sector depends on timely and reliably deliveries of raw materials or semi-finished products as inputs to further processing. It also requires finished products to be transported to warehouses or distribution centers. The major determinant of manufacturing demand is consumer spending, of course. So the trend toward just-in-time inventories has also created increased demand for transportation services as manufacturers seek smaller and more frequent deliveries. Just-in-time allows companies to improve profitability by purchasing materials only as needed, thereby reducing inventory costs for such timely delivery needs. Efficient customs clearances of high importance driving the need for custom brokers, of course, to allocate those assets in the country without paying for taxes, right? Now, let's see who dominates the market. So, see, Stephen?
Yeah, of course, no problem, Eduardo. As most of you know, sea transportation dominates the U.S. customs brokerage market. There's no doubt about it. Maritime freight transport is the major mode of transport of international transport of goods. The number of customs entries by mode is highest in the case of sea transport, and so the revenue of the customs brokerage market. The demand for air freight transport is increasing with growing demand for perishables, chemicals, and valuables, and the rising demand for just-in-time production of goods. the U.S. customs brokerage market for air freight transport is expected to witness faster growth over the forecast period when compared to some of those other modes of transportation. The road freight movement of goods is the dominant mode of transportation in the United States and is an important factor for economic growth. The cross-border land transport, including road, rail, and pipeline transport between the U.S. and North American partners, Canada and Mexico, is increasing steadily and is expected to grow in the future, driven by the USMCA, or now known as the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, which of course replaced NAFTA. The customs brokerage services for cross-border land transport is highly fragmented, with many number of small brokers operating at each border port of entry. And now that we know, which MOT, mode of transportation, dominates the market, I want to take a look at some of the competitive landscape.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. So the competitive landscape is pretty fairly fragmented, right? So there's a number of custom brokers operating in the market. The competition is high. The top players, of course, are companies like UPS, FedEx, but obviously they tend to their own cargo, right? So per volume, of course, they're the largest one, because they are the ones they're entering and filing for their own cargo. There are other significant examples of large players like Livingstone International, Expeditors, Derringer, C.H. Robinson. Based on number of entries, it was estimated that FedEx and UPS together account for almost 35% of the total market. Wow. Although the top 5 10 players take up more than 50% of the market, the companies that account for the remaining market share are more in number, but with very less market shares. So I think we should share, Stephen, some of the tips to, and this brings us to the core topic of this webinar, the 5 tips that we want to provide and discuss with our listeners today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Eduardo. So we do have 5 tips that we're going to talk about today. Some of them may seem second nature to you, common sense wise. However, some of them maybe you don't realize your ABI provider is already enabling for you, and it's just a matter of activating that feature. Because as an expert in the field, customs brokers, they must navigate the sea of changing regulations, and as you know, it is always changing, and understand the import specifics related to particular commodities in order to clear shipments effectively and avoid costly mistakes, not only for yourself, but for your importers. But customs brokers must ensure their paperwork is precise, because if you're not on time as a customs broker, your importer is going to pay, and that doesn't look good on your organization. So one thing, and this may seem very obvious, but one thing to avoid costly mistakes is paying statements in a timely manner. Unnecessary fees are submitted from customs for late statement payments. I've even seen statements that have a $0 balance that weren't submitted, but then $1,000 fine was assessed. Eduardo, I'm not kidding, $1,000 fine for not submitting a $0 payment. And that can be eliminated by simply adding an alert or an automated report that can be sent to your dashboard in your ABI provider or via email, could be received via email. These are the upcoming statements that we have to make sure that we're submitting for our importers. So it seems like common sense to pay your statements, but you'd be surprised at how often I see those unpaid. And check your cash flow. Make sure, hey, we've got these shipments that we got to pay duties on in 10 days. Let's make sure we got the money in the bank for it, because the broker's ready to make the payment if we do. Another tip would be to automate reports related to in-bonds. So make sure you're closing out your in-bonds. There's a certain amount of time that you have to close out an in-bond, whether you're arriving it or exporting it. And you want to make sure that you're submitting that arrival and or export to close out the in-bond to avoid a sanction from customs or a fee from customs. There's different reports in particular ABI software providers that allow pending arrival or pending export reports to be submitted on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. utilize that. Make sure you're receiving those reports or at least logging in and running them yourself to make sure, hey, which inbounds do we have that we haven't arrived yet? And if it's being managed by a third party, say you're filing the inbound and someone else is closing it out, follow up. Make sure that that inbound is being closed out. It's one key tip, and that brings us into a third tip would be to automate your FTZ reports. So in order to avoid costly general order sanctions, shipments held up at the port, fees assessed, automate your FTZ reports so you know when you need to concur your E214s with customs. Not submitting the concurrence to essentially close out that 214 could result in costly fines, shipments being held up, your importer not receiving their product, not being able to complete orders because they don't even have the product in the FTZ. The HMF reports, make sure that those are automated and paid in a timely manner. You can see the key trend here, Eduardo, is make sure you're automating the reports for your different transaction types.
Absolutely.
And receiving those either on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Current inventory reporting reports. So your filers know what they have in inventory and they're not making orders or trying to fulfill orders for importers when that product's not even in inventory yet. Maybe it's still sitting at the shipyard. And one way to help you as a broker or importer check the status of those shipments as they stand with customs leads us into our fourth tip, and that's utilizing the query capabilities. So there are tons of different query capabilities out there that ABI providers offer to different filers. One of them being the denied parties screening. So if you have an importer who is receiving orders and sending inbounds or exporting goods out of the US, make sure that consignee on that form is not on the denied parties list. If they are, they're facing jail time and or fines. There's a query, the denied parties list query that you can perform with most ABI providers that helps keep you and your importer compliant. It's very important that you don't export any of your goods to those parties on that denied list. Big time fines and or jail time can be associated. There's AMS queries, and inbound queries and entry summary queries. The AMS queries provide you with a look at that shipment as it stands with customs, along with the inbound. Have you arrived your inbound? If you're not sure, even though you have, you've ran your report for pending arrival, pending export, run an AMS query. And if it says arrived, then you're good. It's been closed out. But utilize the query capabilities to your advantage. Make sure you're running those queries to stay informed, organized, and of course compliant, and eliminating potential fees there. And finally, you should be automating email notifications for all transaction types. So whether it is an ISF or an entry or an E214 or an inbound, or if there's a PGA associated with an entry, automate email notifications to be sent out to single, multiple, or a particular group of individuals to receive those updates. You can have your importer receive them. You can receive them as the entry filer, or maybe you're sending it off to management. But holds, documents required, especially documents required. UC notification messages. Those are things that you need to know right away. And if you have a shipment that's held up at the port because of a hold that you overlooked in your software, or maybe you didn't set a notification to receive that particular alert, your importer is not going to be happy. Or if you're a self-filing importer and you've got something held up at the port, and you call customs and they say, yeah, we've got a hold on your shipment. We need we've got a docs required message we sent to you. It's there in the ABI transaction. Make sure you're automating those email notifications to be sent out so you're aware.
How can we do that, Steven? I'm assuming this is not something that we can do manually, right? I mean, sending emails.
Right. So within your ABI software, depending on which type of ABI software solution you're utilizing, there should be different options to set notifications and alerts and be sent to an importer based on that account or transaction type, whatever the case may be. I know within the AceLink portal, there's absolutely different types of notifications that you can have automated and sent out. And that really keeps importers and brokers organized. There's usually a setting in there somewhere, Eduardo, where you can automate those different types of reports to be sent
Absolutely.
out, those
Absolutely.
notifications to be sent out. So ask your software provider. If they don't have them develop it. If they won't develop it, maybe time to switch.
Okay, but I think we have one that we can suggest.
Yeah, so we do. We have AceLink ABI, which will provide reports. It covers everything we talked about today. It is a completely web-based platform hosted within Microsoft Azure, ACE certified for all transaction types, very robust, redundant, secure, and helps keep filers compliant. And the most common feedback we receive is the easy use. It's got an open API with every module, and we pride ourselves with the EDI capabilities that are there. A lot of the automation, or most of the automation for receiving notifications, can also be configured within your AceLink ABI portal.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Yep. And speaking of from ABI, maybe you could talk a little bit about the Magaya supply chain, Eduardo?
Sure. So we also, I mean, probably in this webinar, we have custom brokers, but we also have freight forwarders that have in-house brokerage services. So either or, when the car, after you do the filing, you need to either receive the cargo in a warehouse, or you need to manage that shipment and then manage documentation related to the shipment on the import side. So either if you're doing import or export, Magaya Supply Chain Solution can provide with the tools as an end-to-end solution to everything related to freight forwarding and VOCC. So your bookings, your shipments, accounting included. You're going to have dimensioning and weighing for your cargo. And so it will provide, let's say, for example, if you're doing, if you're an FTZ, right? You're providing FTZ services. Well, you do the filing with AceLink, and then you do the physical warehousing management and inventory with Magaya, right? So AceLink and Magaya works together or as a standalone solutions, depending on your situation, right? So I think it's a really good combination, again, depending on what is your situation, and to use either both together, Magaya and AceLink, or separate, right? It might be only a custom broker that just needs AceLink. You might be a freight forwarder that needs maybe only a few features there, or a few filings that are not as complex at a custom brokerage, a dedicated custom brokerage. So together with Magaya, so we have also an ecosystem of applications and extensions, right? That ecosystem of applications amplifies and enhances the core system of Magaya Supply Chain Solution, and then provides solutions to automation in the warehouse, to dimensionate the cargo, handheld devices to do put away, pick, pack, load. We have connectivity, of course, with customs. We have connectivity with QuickBooks Online. We have other products that we have that we're going to see in a second that you can use, again, as a standalone or in conjunction. But overall, the good thing is that this ecosystem can enhance your services and solutions that automate your operation at the end. Now, like I was saying, there's two solutions that can be used standalone or integrated with Magaya. AceLink already, as Steven already covered it for everything related to customs, but we also have Catapult QMS. So Catapult QMS allows you to do queries of the rates directly with the carriers, prepare your proposals, do multimodal, and then that can be passed into Magaya then to manage the whole physical part of the shipment, to put it in a way. So If you're in need of any of these, if you're a freight forwarder, if you're a custom broker, if you are both, right? So we have solutions for you to cover your operation end to end. So we're going to see, we want to appreciate your time. We want to say thank you. If there is any questions that you might have, you can send it through that email, and we will answer them. You can schedule an appointment to either one of us, Stephen or myself, and we'll gladly, answer your questions and provide any other suggestions that you may need for your service. Okay. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everyone.